a lot of different work in Pool 4, and one thing the Corps is involved with in Pool 4 is the Dredge Material Management Plan in Lower Pool 4. And I imagine many of you are familiar with that effort. It's been in the news a lot and continues to be worked through with planning, and that's a really separate effort from what we're looking at. We're looking at the opportunity for some beneficial use of dredged material in the area, restoration, building islands, and the effort that we're looking at we hope to accomplish within the next few years. And the Dredge Material Management Plan is looking at a plan for over 40 years, so really something long-term. So I just want to address that right up front, and I will add, as we get into discussion later in the evening, if there are folks in the room that have questions or would like to talk more about the Dredge Material Management Plan, I can point you to the right people on our staff who can kind of talk with you offline about those questions so that our group can stay focused on the project we're here tonight to discuss, the restoration effort in the head of Lake Pepin. So moving on then to our project for this evening. We're here to present an update on the study. We held a kickoff meeting last July as we were just beginning to identify what are the issues we want to address in this area, what are our objectives. So we're back tonight to present the results of that initial planning effort, some of the alternatives we put together. You may have had the chance to look at some of the maps posted up on the wall showing the concepts that we're putting together, where we think we can make a difference and really see some habitat gains and benefits. We are here to listen. We want to hear input from the public, answer questions as we can, and get feedback. You'll see that we have multiple drafts of our concepts and alternatives posted because we're still not sure what we're going to build. We're looking for feedback, and it's in that planning stage. So we came out with our first meeting when things were really just an idea to identify the problems and scope out the effort. And eventually we'll come back to present the plan that we've decided on. But we're right at that middle place right now where feedback matters a lot because we haven't determined exactly what we will build or what the plan will be. So we're looking at some different alternatives, and our next steps will be comparing and contrasting the benefits of those alternatives and weighing in some of what we learned tonight. And to address questions and concerns. So we will spend a bulk of our time taking questions tonight. The participating entities, as I mentioned, we have a lot of great supporting partners in the room tonight, from Wisconsin to Minnesota, Lake Pepin Legacy Alliance, Audubon, Ducks Unlimited has joined as a partner, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the public, which constitutes many of you here today, industry, other non-governmental organizations, the City of Red Wing, the Village of Bay City, and other stakeholders. So I'm really pleased to see we're up to standing room in the back. There's a lot of interest and support and engagement around this project, and I think that's great. We want to continue to see that, and I think this list doesn't even capture everyone who's involved and part of this effort. So our authority, the Section 204 authority, is a unique authority, and I talked about this at our meeting last July. It's called the Section 204 because it's authorized under the Section 204 of the Water Resources Development Act of 1992. So our shorthand is the 204 to describe this project. And that authority allows us to restore, protect, and create aquatic and wetland habitats in connection with maintenance dredge of an authorized project. So the authorized project is the 9-foot navigation channel on the Mississippi River, which requires continuous dredging for maintenance to maintain that channel. So then the material has to go somewhere, be used for something. This authority allows us to use that material for beneficial use, for building islands, for restoring habitat, for improving aquatic ecosystems. And that's kind of a key word here too, the aquatic and wetland habitats. So we're not taking this material, 3 miles from the river and trying to build habitat there. It's focused right in the aquatic area, right on the river as well. So it's a neat authority where we're able to work in partnership with another core mission, and our restoration costs are lower because we're partnering with some of the dredging that's already being done and moving some of the material that already needs to be removed. So under the Section 204, the benefits must exceed the cost. So really for any federal investment, we want to invest wisely where the benefits will exceed the costs. The project must be environmentally acceptable and complete, and we'll be doing a full analysis to quantify the habitat benefits generated by this project. Under this authority, the maximum federal contribution is $10 million, and the total project is cost shared 65% federal, 35% non-federal. During the study phase, the feasibility phase that we're in now, the costs are 100% federal. So the 35% non-federal costs will be signing a cost share agreement with the Wisconsin DNR, but many supporting entities can come to the table to support that 35% cost share. So like Pepin Legacy Alliance has been working with the City of Red Wing, writing grants, working with other entities and agencies to start to build up support and financial contributions towards that non-federal cost share, the 35%. So here's our study area, the Pierce County Islands, Upper Lake Pepin area at the head of Pool 4. Folks are probably pretty familiar with. A little bit of background about the area. The lake covers 26,000 acres. It's the widest natural reach of the Mississippi River. The upper area consists of border islands, backwater lakes, shallow open water areas. This is designated as a globally significant bird area. So the goals we've identified for our Upper Pool 4 Section 204 study include broadly to improve habitat for native and desirable plant, animal, and fish species, and the beneficial use of dredged material. So it wouldn't be a Section 204 if we couldn't incorporate that beneficial use of dredged material. So we're looking at those two kind of as our highest level goals for the project. And with those goals, we can set forth to think about, well, how can we improve the area? What habitat improvements can we make? And to do that, we first have to understand what are the problems in the area. In what way is the habitat degraded in this area? So the problems that we've identified, working with our team and partners, is the continued sedimentation and sediment resuspension. And so we observe that through the turbid water, the cloudy water that we might see. The lack of emergent and submerged aquatic vegetation, which is often tied to that sediment resuspension and that turbid water. A lack of protected wetlands and aquatic areas, so where we might see areas that are getting more flow passing through them and aren't as protected as perhaps they once were or could benefit different wildlife species. Limited habitat for migrating waterfowl and other species. This is an important migratory flyway. And limited aquatic plant coverage and bathymetric diversity. So we don't see a lot of depth diversity, especially in some of the backwater areas of the lake. I'll show in a little bit here a map showing the depth or the bathymetry of the area. A lot of the area is very shallow, so we don't have a lot of the more deep areas or just that diversity that can be beneficial to different species. So the better understanding of the problems we want to address in the area, we've developed broadly these categories of objectives. And as a team, we dig a little deeper with the objectives to specify our criteria and how we can meet these objectives. But looking categorically, the objectives that we want to achieve in this area are to increase aquatic vegetation, improve bird habitat, improve shoreline habitat, increase and improve floodplain forest, and to improve fish habitat. So we know our objectives, what we want to do, but we're also working within a set of constraints that we need to be mindful of as we go forward, thinking about formulating plans and what we might do to meet those objectives. And these are listed here by category. The first one is institutional, and that includes navigation. So we're working in partnership with the Corps' navigation mission. So we can't do anything that would disrupt or negatively impact commercial navigation or the 9-foot navigation channel. So that's a set constraint, that anything we do can't disrupt that or negatively impact that. Another is flood stages. When we're talking about building in the floodplain or building an island in the river, we need to be mindful of the impacts that could have in the surrounding area or upstream. And specifically, we're required to avoid any induction of flood stages or raising river elevations during flood occurrences. From an engineering perspective, we need to think about what's actually feasible to construct. The lake bottom in this area is very soft. How will we get access to the area? What's feasible to construct? What construction materials are available? Since we are working under that section 204, we are looking to use dredge material, so where is the availability of dredge material? And those kinds of questions come into mind thinking about feasibility for construction. And finally, environmental as a constraint. We need to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act and the components of that. And we've also done some testing in the area, and we'll be sure to avoid contaminated materials that may be in some of this area. So these are a set of constraints that we have in mind as we move forward with developing a plan that we would like to build. So we have identified the problems, we've identified our objectives, and we know the set of constraints that we're working within. So what can we do? We can do some island restoration or island creation, building new islands. We can do bank and shoreline protection. We can do floodplain forest. And that can take a few different forms, from new areas of floodplain forest to enhancing or planting areas of existing floodplain forest. We can do dredging. And different than the dredging that the Corps does in the main channel of the river. By this I mean we can do dredging in some of the backwater areas where we could increase that depth diversity or provide some deeper areas in the backwater. And emergent wetlands, so this could be creating more isolated areas, mudflats, and other emergent wetlands. So now I'm going to run through a series of maps with you showing the project area here, and then some of the alternatives that we're looking at. Let's see if I have a pointer on here. There it is. So we're looking mostly at the priority areas that we're focusing on are the Catherine Pass area up here and the Wakuta Bay area down here. So everyone is oriented. Bay City, the Minnesota side down here. And then here's another image that we added to show. This is the same area with the aerial photo from 1938. I know this isn't the highest quality, and with the light in the room might be a little bit hard to see. But you can see, I think this area here is the Catherine Pass, and then down here the Wakuta Bay area. So just giving us an idea of some of the historic conditions. And it's interesting, I think, to look back because we talk about restoration. So sometimes it's restoring something that was there and that was lost. But other times we look at restoration from the perspective of can we meet habitat quality indicators that maybe we don't see on the map here, but by making changes we would improve quality of habitat to restore quality habitat today. So here's the bathymetry map showing the depths of the pool here in reference to the low control pool. So the browner colors here are elevations above the low control pool, and then the blue going down to darker blue. The darker blue are your deepest areas. You can see the saline line, the main channel, that's your deepest area. And in these backwater areas, a lot of pretty shallow water. So this kind of gets to thinking about that constructability and the feasibility. How do we get our machinery into these areas to do construction? And one of the maps that I'll show in a little bit shows potential opportunities, or where might we dredge for access to get in there to be able to build. So we can see it's pretty shallow. So now I'll move into the alternatives, which is probably what most people are interested in talking about. We have taken sort of an incremental approach in looking at these alternatives, starting with the fewer features shown here, where these are what we think, we haven't done our full quantitative assessment, but based on qualitative assessment, where we think we can start to see, with fewer features, some true return on value and habitat improvement and benefits. and then building on incrementally from here. So you'll see we have a peninsula or an island here with a mudflat here. So the peninsula or island is going to be at a little bit higher elevation. That could support floodplain forest. And then this will be a lower elevation in here to support emergent wetland or other mudflat dependent species. Dredge area, so some deeper water, some overwintering habitat, water level management dike up here, peninsula extending down here, dredge area here. So this is kind of the first increment where some of these are probably going to start to really give us some return on breaking down the wind effect across the lake, reducing wave action, allowing plants to grow, creating some better habitat for fish and ducks and other birds, with just these few features. And then we start to add on from here with the other alternatives. One thing that we want to talk about tonight is the potential feature of putting a channel plug in here at Catherine Pass. So this is alternative 1B. This is the same as alternative 1A as far as the islands, the peninsula, the dredging areas. The only difference is this channel plug. And how we would build on incrementally from here is very similar with or without that channel plug. So I guess what I want to say is we can have a successful project and make a difference with or without that channel plug. We think with this channel plug, and I'll let Kurt and Ryan with the Wisconsin DNR talk a little bit more about it, we can reduce flows back up into this Catherine Pass area, probably see improvements on water quality with reduced turbidity and resuspension. With those improvements to water quality, we can expect to see more aquatic vegetation, better habitat for ducks and other wildlife. But we aren't dependent on that to make a difference. So this is something that we do want to get some feedback on. So moving through the remaining alternatives, we do show this channel plug and all of the rest of the alternatives, but it's kind of at a baseline, we need to make a decision. Do we include it or do we not include it? So alternative 2, here we're adding another island in Wakuta Bay, another overwintering dredge area in Wakuta Bay, adding more islands and peninsulas, and another dredge area up in Catherine Pass. And alternative 3, adding on, again, more islands, more overwintering areas in Catherine Pass, adding on a berm down here where you create an isolated area behind the berm. And alternative 4, so this gets to be kind of everything, the kitchen sink alternative, where we've added on additional water level management dikes. We've added on 2 open water islands out in the Lake Pepin area here. If you think back to the symmetry map, this is where the water starts to get a little bit deeper, and these aren't tied into any other land features. So we can, I'm sure there will be questions and comments on these alternatives, and we can come back to these maps as we get into discussion. Another thing that we're looking at and hasn't been incorporated into any of the alternatives, is still kind of in the assessment stage, is shoreline protection. So we've got some areas marked here. These are areas based on kind of desktop analysis that look like the lowest elevation and some of the thinnest areas of shoreline. So the areas most at risk for shoreline erosion and would most benefit from shoreline protection. But that's something that our team wants to get out to field verify. We do have some pictures, and Wisconsin has been out, but we want to make sure we're targeting the right areas for shoreline protection. So this is what we have so far. Our assessment leads us to think these are the areas that would benefit most from shoreline protection. But this is something that we welcome comments or feedback on from folks that are familiar with the area. If you agree with our assessment, or what your assessment is of the shoreline in the area as far as what locations would benefit most from shoreline protection. So I talked a little bit about the access to build these features. So this map shows, these are the islands we've talked about in all the alternatives, the mudflat, these circles here, the overwintering areas that we would dredge. So these are the project associated features, and then the background colors is the bathymetry, or the water depth. And then we show some potential different routes for access for construction. So it's pretty straightforward. Down here, you've got the main channel here with deep water, and then, basically there's one way into Wakuta Bay. You could move that a little bit up or down, but, kind of straightforward. And in Catherine Pass, there's a couple different ways that you could get into that area to do your construction. So one way is you could come up from the main channel here, up through the Wisconsin channel, right through Catherine Pass, and in through there, you're able to access a lot of your features. Another way is there's this deep water out in Lake Pepin. You could come up through the lake, through this deep water, cut all the way across, have access to these open water island features here, all the way down, and have access to most things. And from here you could just go all the way through. You wouldn't have to even dredge through the pass. So there's a couple of different options. This is going to end up being more expensive to dredge. You're going to be moving a lot more material to come in this way. There's a couple different options versus the Wakuta Bay, which I said is a little more straightforward. So that's something we're taking into consideration, and be interested in feedback on that as well. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about what's next in our process, and then turn things over to the Wisconsin DNR to talk a little bit more about the project and some of the features, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers and discussion. So where we're at right now is we have these alternatives, and we want to refine the alternatives and start to screen things down. That could be, discovering that a feature is not feasible to construct, or as we do our habitat benefit analysis, determining, no, this doesn't really give us a lot of bang for our buck. This doesn't really give us a lot of benefit. So based on, based on what we learned during the more quantitative assessment, we'll be screening down the alternatives and refining the alternatives. One of the important things we do is that quantitative habitat benefit analysis, so that we can know what benefits we're getting from any of the components. And then we'll do a cost-effective incremental cost analysis. And that's required as part of the core planning process. Kind of gives us the idea of our benefit to cost. What are we paying for each increment of habitat benefit? And then we can use that analysis to compare the alternatives and determine, this is really where we're kind of paying our least cost for the return on the habitat benefits. And that's going to justify that this is a good investment of taxpayer dollars. From there, with all that information, we will tentatively select a plan. When we have our tentatively selected plan, we'll develop a draft report and then make that available for the public to review and provide input on. So that's kind of where we're going from here, and we would expect to have a draft report with a tentatively selected plan sometime by fall this year. Great, so I'm going to turn over to Ryan.
Can everybody hear me all right? I've never been accused of being quiet. So
Use the microphone.
Use the mic? Okay, I'll use the mic and really get loud. I'm Ryan Heffley. I am the wildlife biologist for the Wisconsin DNR, covering St. Croix and Pierce County, and I'm also the property manager for the Pierce County Islands, where this project is being proposed to take place. I just want to give a little update on what's going on at the Pierce County Islands wildlife area. So in order for the DNR to do any management, right now we have kind of gone through the master plan process, which basically determines how the property is going to be managed into the future for wildlife, fisheries, and recreation. It is a state wildlife area, and under state statute, we have to manage it for the benefit of wildlife and for the public to enjoy that wildlife. So the main points of the management plan, and this is how we've been trying to manage the property, nothing's really changing, is just to improve wetland habitat, improve the floodplain forest habitat. We're also identifying these various restoration needs within this 204 project. And we're trying to maintain and enhance opportunities for hunting, fishing, trapping, and our other nature-based outdoor recreation. So basically, the master plan is something that we're completing that's going to allow this 204 project to take place on the Pierce County Islands wildlife area, should we be able to get this project to come to fruition in a couple of years. And so I just want to put a plug in. The plan is finished and it's going to the Natural Resources Board for approval next week. And if anybody wants to provide any public comments, regarding the master plan, whether you support it, oppose it, if you think there needs to be changes, whatever. You can actually submit comments until this Friday, April 6th, until, I believe, up until 11 a.m. to Lori Ross at this email address. And just mention that it's item 2B3 on the April NRB board agenda. If you have questions and you want to comment, provide your inputs, you can see me afterwards. I'll provide a lot better details on how to do that. This is just a quick and easy version. So if anybody's interested in reviewing the plan and providing that public input for the plan, please feel free to do that, and we encourage it. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kurt.
My name is, my name is Kurt Rasmussen. I am a Mississippi River planner with Wisconsin DNR. I generally work with some of the channel maintenance folks from Army Corp of Engineers on channel maintenance projects, including the BMMP that was mentioned earlier. And most of my projects, we're getting dredge material out of the river into certain areas. Most of them involve either quarries or some farm field or something. This project's cool because we're going to beneficially use this to create some habitat up around Lake Pepin, hopefully. I am going to actually take a step back. Hold a second. So, Wisconsin DNR also did a water quality assessment of this area with some help from Minnesota DNR. There is a ton of data for pool for the Mississippi River. It is a long-term resource monitoring pool, meaning we have guys out there year after year monitoring this pool from Minnesota DNR. With that, Sean Giblin from our office, he's not here tonight, but I'm going to try and represent him. He broke this area down into these different basins that you can see up here and looked at all of the summer water quality data for this area. One of the things you're probably wondering when you look at these maps is what these guys just get some crayons out and draw stuff on here, and there's a little bit more science that went into it. So Sean took all of the water quality assessment data, which included water depth, Secchi depth. Secchi is a measurement of water transparency, water velocity, nitrogen, phosphorus, dissolved oxygen, water temperature, chlorophyll A, and total suspended solids. He threw those all into a model to look at, what has the most impact to this area. And what we found was that the factors that have the most variance, that add the most variance to the system, have the most impact, are generally water depth and water velocity. When I say water velocity, I mean flowing water. Generally what we have for the main channel is dirtier water. The same thing goes through the Wisconsin channel. You can actually see that here in this Catherine Pass area, or Catherine Cut, or whatever you refer to it as. You can see this area is protected from the flow. You can see the dirty water from the main channel spilling out into it. So as I said, what he found was water depth and water velocity, and water depth could potentially be explained by resuspension of fine sediment. Lake Pepin is basically a big sediment trap. I mean, you get dirty water coming down, it goes into Lake Pepin, it settles out. And then with that, you get wind that comes up, and that resuspends that fine sediment. Then that creates issues. So one of the things we tried to do, as you see on the maps, is create features, land features that break up some of that wind fetch. The other thing is the velocity. I had talked with some folks already about this, but when you're talking velocity, we're trying to disconnect some of these areas from the main channel. With resuspension, Sean then took this a step further, threw some of the data from the areas we're looking at into a very simple model that looks at lake depth and lake length, and looked at what it would take, what kind of wind speed it would take to resuspend half the lake. What he found, even in the Catherine Pass area as it currently resides, only about a 7-mile-an-hour wind will resuspend that fine sediment. So when you have that, you have this turbid water, you can't get vegetation to grow, you cannot get some of these features to get established at all. So that's one of the objectives that you saw Sierra present earlier. So with the features they have and some of the science behind it, we tried to have or design some project features that reduce connectivity with turbid inflows. That's why we have some of that cut off right here. Try to reduce the sediment plume from coming into there. Same thing goes for the Wakuta Bay area. You're trying to kick that sediment-laden water past that area. We're also trying to reduce wind fetch. You see these weird peninsulas sticking into the bay that aren't normally there. That's the reason behind that. And then with that, we also want to increase some backwater depth. Deeper water, you don't get that resuspension. Here's it. You guys may not be able to see this. Anyone recognize this photo?
Goose Lake.
You guys are absolutely right. We were out there during high water event. You can see it's very hard probably in the sun, but this is a turbid water, and you can see it actually going past that entrance to Goose Lake. And you can see Goose Lake is kind of protected. The water's a lot clearer. That's kind of one of the goals that we're trying to create. And just so you could visually see on a map, this is that Goose Lake area. We were right in here. And like I said, the water was up, the water was turbid, but you could clearly see that break in the two different water qualities. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sierra for questions. And this is really the reason why we're all here.
Great, thanks, Kurt. Yeah, so I'm going to open it up for questions here. We have a pretty big crowd tonight, so you can raise your hand, I can bring the mic to you, and then what we'll do is just kind of turn to different folks in the room, whoever's best able to address the questions as they come. We have a full hour for questions, and at that point we'll start to wind things down, and if anyone hasn't had the chance to ask a question, you can find one of us on your way out. And also I'd like to point out that on the agenda that you picked up on the way in, there's a place on the back side for a written comment, my email and contact information, a website for the project that has just a little bit of basic background and a fact sheet. So there are ways to follow up if something, you don't get the chance to make your comment tonight or something comes to you tomorrow or the next day, please continue to reach out and stay engaged. With that, I'll open up the floor. Yeah, I see you back here.
How much dredge material would be used between either 1 and 4? What's the range in dredge material that would be used, and where would that material be coming from?
Okay, great question. Did folks hear that?
Really loud.
Between alternative 1 and 4, what would be the amount of dredge material used, or where would the dredge material come from? We don't have an exact number as far as how much dredge material would be used. I don't know if anyone has a great number off the top of their head they want to throw out.
300, 700,000? Yeah.
300 to 700,000 cubic yards, and that's a pretty rough estimate at this point. And then the dredge material would likely be coming from Reed's Landing.
Okay. So one time you showed access to the Bay City Flats there, and then the next time you showed a plug, channel plug. Is that not correct? You had those access lines?
Mm-hmm. So as far as access for construction, we could do access through that and then still build the plug as a component after we've done the islands inside. So those aren't mutually exclusive. Or we could choose to not build a plug and choose to not dredge access. We could choose to do nothing there. So really the range of possibilities are still open, but doing access and building the plug are not mutually exclusive. It would be a matter of sequencing.
So that plug, I mean, that's kind of a nice access into that area. Is there any other way to leave that open without blocking the sediment that goes in there?
Yeah, maybe I'll let you guys respond to this if you want to.
There is another alternative that kind of uses peninsulas to redirect some of that flow around that area. We weren't sure how many people use that. We tried to get through there in the summer, and
It's not the only way to get in that way.
zip across.
You know, historically that's been a
Go ahead.
historically that's been a real deep run. It's filled in the last 15 years
Okay.
or so. But I mean, that was a main course out of Bay City to get into the back channel, and it's a good habitat for fish. It's a nice deep hole that the female walleyes like to lay in there in the spring, and there's a flat underneath below it. you know, I think a lot of people in here would hate to see that disappear. It's a nice area. I understand your concept about the fill and the sediment coming through, but it's a key area. It's a habitat. I've seen ducks and geese sitting in there, and when everything freezes up, there's a little current there, and they like to congregate in there. You know. And then since I'm talking, when we looked at the shoreline protection area, you know, I look at like Fifth Cut now. If you're familiar with that, across from Young's Cabin, you guys are familiar if you're not from the area. But that kind of the beginning of Bay City Flats from the main channel there, the last cut before the head of the lake that comes into Bay City there. That's disappearing. The trees have all tipped over. That in a major flood or something, as that little point down the Fifth Cut, hard to see right there. It's that real skinny one right by where you're just a little bit south of where you're at now, a little bit below, right there. That's almost gone, and that's going to keep disappearing. And that could actually change your flow. You know, to start breaking down Bay City Flats instead of staying in the main channel. I guess I'd be concerned about that. And then you look up on the upper left hand up there, I believe that's Pump House Slough. You know, that would be below that, the red line, the shoreline protection area there. I don't see there's a lot of areas that would benefit a lot more than that area, I guess would be my input. You know, we've also got, you know, I moved down here in '83, and we had 5 cuts from the main channel into the back channel. First cut now is a dead end. It's plugged up. There used to be called Cookies Cut that would take you in the back channel. That was a huge navigational route for boaters out of Red Wing. For the back channel, that's a dead end now. Second cut, you can still navigate. You got to be very careful. But the downstream, that every year the trees are tipping over, and that's getting wider and shallower. But it's still a cut. I mean, one load of rock would save that thing for a long, long time. Third cut's a woods. It's a stump field. Fourth cut's a woods. It's actually a woods now. It's gone, and now fifth cut, it's not even a cut anymore. It's kind of just opening up into Bay City. So, just curious to see if we're looking at that. And I know we've talked about we're not talking about the back channel, but as a Wisconsin guy and the public ground up in there, it's filling in terribly, just like the head of the lake is. And there's a lot of habitat from the head of the back channel to the Bay City Bay area. And I'm concerned that the flow is slowing down so much that it's going to be just a mud flat, you know, just a dead end in not too many more years. So, something to look at in the future, I guess.
Yep, and we, you know, part of that planning process included a lot of those areas. When it comes down to it, there's only so much money that's allowed to be spent, and so we have to prioritize.
Yeah.
We're trying to pick the first ones where we know we can have the biggest impact if we get some of these features in. So we recognize those issues, and we're hoping one day we'll be able to start addressing them, but obviously money is the key issue in a lot.
But on the Corps' end, would it be beneficial, would they save money in the long run if they prevent those second and fifth cut from blowing out? I mean, you have a big flood, I don't know, that just, it seems to me as a taxpayer that would be cost effective to preserve that versus doing a major reconstruction of that after it's blown out, but whatever.
Yeah, another question here?
Aren't there any dredge materials closer than Reed's Landing that we could use up here for the project? I mean, that's a long ways to push dredge material. I mean, there's a lot of dredging that happens up in this part of the pool, and not knocking on Reed's Landing, but I just think that that's you're going to waste a lot of resources hauling dredge material from Reed's Landing to the north end of the lake.
Yeah, Zach?
You're exactly correct, and that's our first option. The problem with that is that we're limited by the amount of material that is generated from our channel maintenance dredging up in the Cannon River area. That's our first option. Now we're going to identify that location and dredge to our authorized dimensions as much material as we can, and then utilize that for this project. Beyond that, we know that we're going to have to take material from Reed's Landing. For the purposes of the project, we're just doing our planning because Reed's Landing is the only static volume of material that we can bank on. We have no idea what Mother Nature is going to deal us in any given dredging season at the Cannon River area. So, our average is 15,000 yards per year between Cannon River and Trenton dredge cuts. So the majority of the granular sand is going to have to come from downstream. We're also proposing to dredge some fine material at the head of Lake Pepin for topsoil borrow. So that's also a navigation concern at the head of Lake Pepin there, and we're hoping that we can clean things up from a navigation perspective and also use some of that material for topsoil for these islands.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, question back here?
Wouldn't it be more efficient to get it from the old cove up by Treasure Island? I mean, you're much closer than Reed's Landing. You've got a lot to contend with, but regardless, trucking is going to be much more efficient than barging at that point.
Yeah, we're also limited under our O&M authority from where we dredge. So we have to dredge where we're funded, which is the main navigation channel. And that has to be a component of this project, because the material has to come from a federal project. So if it doesn't come from a federal project, then O&M, our program, can't subsidize the cost for the same.
Okay, I just wanted to say I agreed with the gentleman over there. I mean, I use the Catherine Cut and go through Fifth Cut quite a bit during the summer. And you do see a lot of fishermen going through Catherine Cut. That's a pretty nice access to the back channel if you're coming out of Bay City. It allows you to cut across and get to the back channel without heading into the lake. On a windy day, that's really nice with a small boat. And I agree with Fifth Cut. That's just disappearing. It's so wide now. It used to be a little cut. Now it's several hundred yards wide.
Thank you. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could tell us if any portion of the study is focused on but creating these islands in that area. One of the goals of that is to slow the water down or create areas where the flow rate isn't as high. How will that affect the amount of suspended material that reaches Lake Pepin, and how much of it will fall out in, say, the area from Presbyterian Point to mile marker 786 down to mile marker 784. Has any of the study been focused on how much this will increase the sedimentation of the north end of Lake Pepin?
Yeah, I don't think we've done a full sediment budget analysis. I don't know, Dan, if this is something you want to answer.
Yeah, the sediment transport study is ongoing. It'll be based off of what some of the preliminary concepts are looking at, but in general, if we start to close off some of the areas, we know that deposition still has to occur. It'll just be pushed downstream, just in general.
So just generally speaking, since the study isn't complete, the increased deposition that we see from, say, Presbyterian Point on down will just actually extend further down into the lake. Is that correct?
Yeah, depending on what alternative is selected.
Okay. So it'll just the Corps' position on that is it's okay to let that portion of the lake fill in more than it currently is. No, I know, I'm sorry. Speaking to the point you were speaking about removing some of the fine sediment for use as topsoil on the islands, do you have any idea how much volume you'd be speaking of for something like that?
I'm sorry, you said
the volume of fine sediment that would remove from the north end of Lake Pepin for topsoil on the created island.
I don't recall the volume of topsoil.
You're talking the volume of topsoil?
So, say from
you're moving downstream instead of allowing it to settle out in this area. Is that what you're asking?
right.
I don't know. Sure about my other work with me. We do have some information that talks about how much sediment is actually going into Lake Pepin, and even the breakup between fine material and dead load. And of course, most of the material running into Lake Pepin is fine material. I had numbers, I don't have them with me, but we can get back to you on that. That would be something we will look at in the report, in the study. My feeling is that relative to the amount of sediment going into Lake Pepin, the amount that we would be removing from here and shunting downstream is probably very small in relative terms. And this gets to one of the heart of the issue with any project like this. There's always trade-offs. And the way this is being set up now, it is thought that saving this area is valuable relative to the trade-off of pushing more of the sediment downstream. but it is certainly a trade-off, just like we're talking about now, the trade-off for that plug, you know. So I picture all the sediment running into the area, but everybody likes the plug access, and always trade-offs, hard decisions to make. Frankly, that's why we're here talking tonight, is what are the reasonable trade-offs?
Has anybody done any research on potentially stopping the sediment or curing some of the sediment that comes in from Minnesota? 'Cause that's where 90% of it comes from.
So I wanted to address this question, a couple of the questions that have come up quickly. One, we've done a lot of work to try and address the amount of sediment coming in to Lake Pepin from the Minnesota River, which is about 90%, and it's about 1 million metric tons per year. And so we've shared this on social media and our newsletter, but it's about a full city block raised to the height of the Fauché Tower in downtown Minneapolis every year that's coming into Lake Pepin. And so working with Audubon, we were kind of thinking about like, well, what does this really mean if we are potentially increasing the amount of sediment that's moving downstream given the total amount that's coming in every year? And right now the estimates are that the entire lake will be completely filled in within about 340 years. If we do this project, it might be 339 years. And so, yes, we are moving more sediment, but proportionately, do we just let this area degrade and let further areas degrade over time, or do we show that we can get some benefits, protect the area, and as a long-term vision, start thinking about what are future areas that we want to do projects on around the entire lake beyond just this project. But this project is going to demonstrate what kind of benefits we can see. But Lake Pepin Legacy Alliance is certainly here long-term to think about the entire lake beyond just this project, and so to just kind of keep that in mind as we're going forward. The Minnesota River is very tricky. It's a lot of changes in hydrology that have increased flows in already erosive areas. It's very expensive. Mark from the Department of Ag is here, and I'm sure he could share many stories about just how difficult that is. And it's mostly agricultural land, which is unregulated, and so you don't have a lot of leverage to make changes upstream. If there were a silver bullet, we'd be totally on board to try and make that happen. But in the last 10 years or so, there's been about a 1% reduction in sediment from the Minnesota River, and the law requires for a sustainable sediment load to Lake Pepin a 50% reduction. So if the way that you asked that question, there's data for it, but I think that in terms of the amount of sediment coming into Lake Pepin, there are records. They've taken sediment cores, and so you can see how that's changed over time and how the depths have changed. I don't know if anyone else in the room has knowledge about that.
Because it'd be an interesting figure to find out exactly how much degradation there's been since they've been keeping records as far as the silting. Us local guys, we see it, how it just is filling in all the way. You got to go down past Frederick's Point before you cut across it. That's an astronomical amount of
they have records showing how much sediment has been coming into Lake Pepin every year and how that's gone up about 10 times the amount, prior to settlement in the 1850s. And then if you look at the turbidity at the head of the lake versus at the lower end of the lake, it goes from it just basically everything's dropping out at the head of the lake, and so the turbidity shows that, but I don't know if we have a total quantity.
Do you have historical data as far as the depth of Lake Pepin going back?
Yeah, we have a really interesting map the Wisconsin DNR put together that shows the change over 100 years, what used to be greater than 3 feet deep and what's now less than 3 feet deep.
Okay.
And if you want to talk to me afterwards.
Pretty good, thank you.
Great, another question here?
I just wanted to say that the information that he is asking about, those quantities and so on, are contained in the study that Met Council Commission of the Science Museum of Minnesota's researchers did, and was released, I believe, in about 2003. And I think that that's available online. I'm sorry, I don't have the name of the study. But it talks about volume reduction and so on.
Great, thank you. And we can track that down if folks want to reach out to Riley or myself later. We can track that down and make sure you are able to take a look at some of that information. Yeah.
How do you address the small Moore Harbor Bay City? What's that part of the project? That's right in the middle of the project.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if there's anyone else on my team that wants to jump in.
Well, I think actually Bay City Harbor, I think this is another federal authorized project. I believe the city is looking at dredging some of it themselves. We don't have funding, again, as Zach would say. You get money for the 9-foot channel, so we need to get specific money from Congress to dredge that harbor. And I don't think we dredged, that harbor was what, in the 60s became a federal? 65, yeah. But I believe the city or the village is thinking of excavating some of it. We're looking at maybe using some of that material as topsoil, but we're not using any federal money, whether it's 204 or M money, to use any of that for that dredging.
So couldn't you use the dredging material to get into the harbor, even get into the landing?
Yeah, one of those things, if you can bring up that, sort of the access map there.
So you could use the dredge another channel to into the harbor, it's a city. And they've been fishing the back channel for 50 years, and you can launch a boat at the back channel, but you can't get down into this area because of the silt. You can't get through anymore. It saves getting into Catherine or the Bay. You can't get out of Bay City half the time. You can't launch a boat. There's no other boat landings in this area where you can get to it. Main Rock's bad, Bay City's bad. You gotta go all the way to Main Rock, maybe, or you gotta go. Everything's on the Minnesota side. Wisconsin, so you can get down to this. There's no access. So you got to basically
in the deeper water areas. So they help meet multiple objectives. The deeper water areas do benefit the fish, but then as Kurt pointed out, those deeper water areas are also more resistant to the sediment resuspension. So when wind passes the lake, the shallow areas are resuspended more rapidly. So we see benefits for fish because of the depth, but also we see potential response with clear water and aquatic vegetation, and that benefits ducks and other habitat and wildlife as well.
Where's this dredge material going for these pools?
So that when we look at these little areas where we would do the backwater dredging, it has to balance out where we would use that then as the topsoil or the fine material on top of the sand that's the base of the island. So the islands we look at building have two components, the sand, and that's what comes out of the main Mississippi River navigation channel or off of Reed's Landing. That's our channel maintenance material, and that coarse material is the base of the island. But then to plant trees and grass and have lush habitat on the terrestrial part of the island, we need a finer material or a topsoil material. And that fine material comes out of where we would do the dredging in the backwater or this access dredging. So ultimately, how much we dredge in those backwater areas, how big those circles end up being, is by balancing the equation, how many islands do we build and how much topsoil do we need.
Well, I'm on the village board in Bay City, and we got a permit to dredge off the end of the harbor, but we're required to haul it 2 miles away because it's in a floodplain. And this fish pools, that'll be in the floodplain too, I don't know. That's what grabs a lot of, why does the village have to haul their dredging materials 2 miles?
By the way, my name is Steve Clark. I'm a biologist for the Corp of Engineers, and I handle the environmental regulations and that sort of thing. So the reason why you have to haul it away is because the Clean Water Act doesn't permit you to place fill in the water for the purpose of disposing of it, just getting rid of it, if you will. We are placing fill in the water here for the purpose of improving habitat. So you guys went through a permitting process, and said, yeah, take this material 2 miles away, upland, somewhere not in the water. We go through, because you got a permit from the Corps, and we are the Corps, we don't actually permit ourselves, we go through the exact same process you would have, and we effectively permit the place of this material in the water, because it has to be in the water for the purpose of this project, because it's for habitat. So that's a couple of things. So to be honest with you, I don't know if there's an opportunity to work those two together or not. It's something we're thinking about. To get back to one of the other questions that this gentleman was asking is why can't we just dredge, the channel under this project? That all comes down to what we're authorized to do with this money. This 204 program is for habitat benefit. The purpose of your channel is for recreation, so we're not legally allowed to spend the 204 money to dredge your channel.
Sounds like you need topsoil though. And they've
But
got
we do need topsoil, but I can get topsoil from the fish locations and get habitat benefits from doing that.
Well, basically, so
Okay, question here and then Tina going over here.
Does your project have funding to plant trees,
Yes.
other things? So when you're done, you'll get your island.
Yes, yeah.
As a matter of fact, the question was, does our project have money to plant trees? Not only do we have money to plant trees, we're actually designing the islands at a height that would grow the kinds of trees we are wanting to grow.
How high are the islands?
Roughly, right now we're looking at about 7 feet above low control pool, I believe. Is that about right? Something like that?
Depending on the island, it needs to tie in with whatever berm or island is nearby. Obviously, you're not going to put a real high island at the end of where it's going to wash or create issues.
No. Well, we tend to plant willows close to the water so they can help hold the islands in place. But we're targeting an oak community for these islands. It depends. And those are really low, and you will, no matter what you do, you will get willows on the low islands. But at 7 feet above low control pool, we probably shouldn't be seeing any willows coming in.
Yeah, right here.
about 5 years ago, there was a program called Mississippi Makeover at Pool 2, which described very similar processes, and they were trying to, they were concerned about fetch and building islands and restoration. Has anything come of that? I mean, it's similar, in, not necessarily in scope, but certainly in concept. Have you heard anything about that or seen anything happen?
Well, Mississippi Makeover, I think, was focused on pools 2 and 3, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we looked at trying to do some islands in North Sturgeon Lake, and unfortunately could not get Minnesota to sign the contract with the Corps. There were some issues there. I think there was also, we were going to do a minor water level drawdown in pool 3, but obviously that was tied into the project. But we haven't done anything like that up here. We've done plenty of island construction, obviously down pools 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. But this is probably the farthest north we've come as far as island construction of this magnitude. But most of those have been done under the Mississippi River Restoration Program. So, nothing in pool 2 and 3 as far as Mississippi Makeover.
Question up here?
I've got a lot of questions, but I'm glad you brought up the Pool 3 project because when we're talking about doing that,
Microphone.
one of the things that the Wisconsin DNR wanted to do was to plug the cuts going back into North Lake because that's where most of the sediment was coming from.
60% of the sediment goes through North Sturgeon Lake that comes out of Mississippi.
Very good. They wanted to plug those so that that sediment wouldn't go into the lake and it would come down to the head of Lake Pepin. And that was just one of the trade-offs that they were talking about. Now I know it didn't go through. It didn't go through because of where the sediment was going. It went through because Minnesota DNR didn't charge for it, so or sign off on it. So my question is that if we do whatever we do here, trying to keep the sediment from entering the lake, what's going to stop the Corps of Engineers from doing a project up north again where there's more sediment coming downstream? Nothing.
Well, as I think somebody had mentioned earlier, it's that Minnesota River. If we could sort of control that. I mean, again, there's always going to be sediment coming down the river, right? So the higher the flows, the more sediment you get. The intention of this project really is to focus on using 2 pots of money. O&M money, federal, Section 204 money, federal. We're trying to do something good with the same. I mean, there's always flows. I think Brian said 1 million yards every year.
But you're missing my point. My point is that the Corps decides to divert the siltation from up there. Where is it going to come? It's going to come back down here. Right. So what's to stop the Corps from changing the sediment flow from what it is now to worse from coming from upstream? than what it is today.
Well, we look at those things. I mean, any kind of habitat project we would do upstream, and North Sturgeon's a good case. We had to look at that to make sure we weren't dumping more sand into the river, and then O&M would have to spend more money dredging it out. We can't impact the 9-foot channel. So I don't think we would be sort of trying to send more sediment down.
60%, you said.
Well, 60% goes through North Sturgeon, and the DNR wanted to keep those openings there. I think there were 3 of them, because they liked the delta formations in Northern Sturgeon. They felt that was, you know, diversity is good. There was a time we probably would have plugged those, but then we would have put more sand in the channel, and then we'd have to dredge more and put it on 4 islands. So I think when we looked at those as a team, Wisconsin wanted to shut them off to kind of keep the sediment out, and Minnesota wanted to keep the openings there because they like the delta formations.
I think that's a very good case for keeping Katrina not plugged here. And even if you decide not to plug it, using the Katrina Passett or Catherine Cut as a way of, well, you're going to dredge it, so you can have the equipment go back there. It doesn't matter if you dredge it or if you plug it, it's still going to take care of any fish spawning habitat that's there or fishing opportunities, which is not really my concern. It's more about the spawning areas.
Yeah. Well, with those inlets too at North Sturgeon, some of the fishermen would say this is great catfish habitat. So there was sort of a pushback there of maybe we shouldn't take those off.
So every situation's unique. And in Northern Sturgeon, we had many conversations about what the similar situation to this. We had 3 cuts coming into Northern Sturgeon, actually it was North Lake. And there was a conversation about whether or not the trade-off of losing that side channel habitat was worth the benefit you might gain by keeping that flow and sediment out of the backwater habitat. 2 different kinds of habitat. And it was a lengthy discussion. And in that case, the Minnesota DNR, because it was a Minnesota project, at the end of the day, we decided to keep those cuts open and not close them off, as you see proposed here, or asked, I guess, here. This is a similar situation. There's like a few different things that can happen here. We could choose to close it off, keep the sediment out of this area, and benefit the backwater fishery habitat, vegetation, everything we talked about. We could choose to close it off. We can access we could act like was mentioned. If we access cut through there and then plug it off, it probably really doesn't matter if we do the access cut or not, because you've already dredged through the channel and changed it from what it is now. We could choose to leave it open and do the access cut through that channel, which would change it. It'd still be good for boat access, probably be better, frankly, for boat access, but you would lose the spawning habitat that's there now, assuming that it doesn't come back. So we could do that. We could just leave it alone entirely and come in through access through the other direction. That's about twice as much access material to dredge. There's a lot more money, but that's something that could be done. So those are kind of like some of the options. I mean, we can leave the cut alone entirely. We can access cut through it and then plug it. We can just plug it. That's kind of what the team is wondering what to do. We need to have a conversation about those trade-offs. What's worth it?
I think
the example of North Lake is I like to show it as proof that we're not just going to come in with an idea and say we're going to plug it, and that's just the way it is. Because we had a long conversation and made a decision not to plug those channels.
Okay, one more question here, and then sir, you're next.
Okay, one last question, and that's the sand pile up on pool 3. Yes, and is that what you're going to be doing down here in the head of the lake with the islands that you're talking about here?
So make an island that looks like that?
Yes.
So the question, if anyone's familiar with it, we have an island in pool 3 right above the dam called the Coral Island. It's where we place our dredged material. And the question was, is that what these islands are going to look like? And the answer is no. That is, gosh, over 20-some feet high, and it's just a barren, ugly pile of sand. It's just a temporary storage place for sand. What we would be doing here, our cross sections are 150 feet wide, maybe 7 feet high total. The core is sand, and the top is topsoil. It's a foot to, I'm not sure what we decided,
that's another detail to figure out, a foot, maybe 2 feet total of topsoil, and then you plant it to forest.
But you have to ask then, this is supposed to be over a plan for the next 40 years?
No.
No, I missed.
No, what Sierra said before was the DMMP for getting rid of all the sand in Pool 4 downstream of Pepin is a plan for 40 years. This is a short-term plan. This is something we'd be hopefully constructing within a few years.
So you're not gonna be taking sand for 40 years and bringing it up here?
No.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, question here?
Thank you, and it's probably for the biologist. A key question that did not come up is just in general invasive species. You know, Asian carp, will these designs enhance or degrade from potential Asian carp habitat? Or could they concentrate the Asian carp such that in the future that they could be harvested more easily? Has that been thought of? As well as maybe some other deeper water habitats for, well, what we used to have for freshwater mussels is another related question.
There's a couple of big questions there. You guys want to, Asian carp, this isn't gonna, I don't think, I can't see it mattering. And we haven't considered whether or not this could be used in the future to corral carp or anything like that.
I was thinking about Sorenson's work out of the university where he found those deep pools in the winter and that kind of a thought process.
Without being intimately familiar with his work, but I do know, I think these are probably going to be too shallow. And as of right now, we're just not seeing the carp up here. So that a project like this would be formulated for any kind of Asian carp control. Regarding mussels, I guess I don't necessarily see this project as being a direct benefit to mussels, but we are very concerned with mussels, and we do actually already started to do some survey work, and we'll have to do some more to make sure we're not having too much of an impact.
I want to make sure I'm not overlooking folks in the back here, so.
Sarah,
Yeah.
I was just gonna,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
Kelly Starford, Minnesota DNR, about the Asian carp question. I think that there are some areas that we see now, like the Sorensen's work and stuff, where the Asian carp be mixed with buffalo. These are really not that kind of habitat. We wouldn't typically see them in that type of area. This is more fast panfish or something, so a little bit different habitat type, but it's a good thought. I mean, if we do have areas that could concentrate them, that is a possibility we could harvest there.
You got a question?
Yeah, I just want to, I have, nobody's mentioned the main channel at, just by what Huda Bay they're filling in. Just want to get an explanation on what this is going to help do to create more area there that is created a very, very skinny channel there. I'm wondering if this up here is going to actually benefit that area. Or if the dredging could come from there and move back up, you know, from there to create that channel to be bigger. Because that was a major
I'll try to answer
issue.
some of that, and I'm not going to touch on the hydraulics because that's not my area of expertise. I'm not going to pretend that it is, but from the dredging perspective, I think this project can really help us because we have a potential opportunity to widen that location and use that fine material for topsoil for these islands. So I think, I don't know about the longevity of that solution, but certainly in the short term, that's going to help navigation out the whole time.
Yeah, if we're looking at that peninsula, you can kind of see it at the tip of Huda Bay there. I mean, what really that's going to be doing is tightening your cross-sectional area and just kind of looking at it from a high level and think that your velocities would be higher, so your ability, almost like a training structure, your ability to push sediment past that shallow part might be increased. But that's something that we definitely can and should look at.
I know last year, right, out in what most of us know as Frederick's Point, there was, you know, big boats, small boats on plane that bellied up on through the shipping channel. That nothing seemed to be. I mean, that's where Kurt's question came from. Is number one, it's super narrow, but is there going to be control to keep that from filling in? And is this island peninsula number one gonna narrow up that channel, or are you gonna keep it wide enough so it's that you get a lot of fishermen in there that quite frankly, sit right in the middle of the channel. And a lot of times, whether it be a cruiser, a go-fast boat, a ski boat, it's really not safe to do anything but idle past them.
Yeah, none of these, rest assured that none of these features will impede on the navigation channel.
Will it help widen them is my question?
Will it help?
Will it help widen them out?
Well, like I said initially, we'll certainly get a short-term solution there. Another feature that we're talking about is like a long-term, kind of a O&M island, an island that our office would pay for, tied to the navigation channel, where it might be a little like donut-shaped island that we can place material in, fine material in, from the head of Lake Pepin over the course of several years to ensure that we have that width there that we continue to maintain, and that towboats aren't. Because I mean, the majority of the reason that towboats continue to go through there is because of the characteristics of the material. If that was coarse sand, it probably wouldn't be able to make it through. That's the reality. But because it's a little bit finer, but it's still a problem. And it's something that we're considering as part of this project.
I know, with my earlier question, you said money can't kind of trade projects, but in this case, it would make more sense to work together with the channel dredging and this to benefit both.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so one of the things that we have to do as part of this project is there has to be an O&M component, or operations and maintenance component to this project. It's one of the requirements of 204. So our office that deals with the navigation channel maintenance, we will pay for a portion of this total project, and that's mostly tied to just supplying the material, dredging it out of the river, putting it on a barge, and then sending it, let's say 5 miles, 3 miles, whatever it may be. So we're partnering certainly for this project, but one thing that we're trying to, let's call it maybe a 2-year construction solution where we're utilizing dredge material for good things, is having one of these islands be a site that can hold material from the head of Lake Pepin for maybe 3 to 5 events. So it's not necessarily a static solution. We also, at least for the head of Lake Pepin, have somewhat of a longer term solution. I hope that answers your question.
Is the Corps going to do this work themselves, using their dredges and their equipment, or are they going to contract it out for bids?
It would be a contract.
Yeah, question here?
I just have one observation and then a question for the Wisconsin DNR. The Catherine Pass, which is there's issues opening it and closing it. One thing I think would happen if you do use that as a dredge out, if people would understand that channel, it's fairly deep, 6 feet, and it's pretty fast moving water, and it pumps in a lot of sediment. Now, if you dredge that out to say 6 feet all the way in, all the way back to where you're going to be dredging out your lake, it's just going to pump lower than it is pumping it now. I think it would make the problem worse. And then I wanted to ask the DNR if they could explain a little bit more about the, I'll call it the Goose Lake concept. It seems to me that that's what you're trying to develop in the Bay and Bay City, is to have basically the same thing that you have in Goose Lake, a lake that stays deep because the sediment doesn't go in. And that would be another argument for closing the pass. As many benefits as that pass has, I just think it's probably better to close it.
So Goose Lake, the elevations on the land surrounding Goose Lake are what, at least, I don't know, it's like 15 feet maybe high for the most part. So you really don't get any event flows that come over and still into Goose Lake, from my understanding anyways, which is not real great for this area. But I mean, it's got a high berm that surrounds most of it. So a lot of the sediment enters these systems during these big events where you get that water that's just chocolate brown. It's just sediment laden. It's what Zach hates, actually. You get these streams that come in and they're dumped.
But you'll create great fishing habitat with
That's the thought process is, okay, yes, but we're gonna create some fishing habitat back in here. We're gonna dredge some holes, we're gonna have some bathymetric diversity, we're gonna have, you know, some depth back there, whereas right now, I don't know how deep do you think this area is back here? A couple feet maybe? Freezes out in the winter, you don't have any, you can't go in there and ice fish, can you? Maybe pike in the spring, but other than that, hopefully, you know, something we would get is get some bluegill and crappies to move into those areas and create some ice fishing in the winter. And then with that spawning and some, you know, you're getting aquatic vegetation, you're getting all sorts of ecosystem benefits, not just one species. You know, you're adding some wildlife benefits and potentially some forestry benefits. I'm trying to, you know, create this whole ecosystem based benefit for the entire area. So, and you know, the cut is an issue. I mean, it's something that obviously people use. It does obviously supply sediment into the system. It's going to be an issue that we're going to have to come up with an idea of how to get past it.
Peter, can I answer that?
Absolutely.
So, I just kind of back of the envelope analysis of looking at that depositional area. If that channel plug is closed, it's about, just to throw some numbers out there and quantify, it's about 200 acres of it, you know, that depositional area that would be improved. Just for food for thought. And I worked with Sorensen's group. I studied young of the year or young juvenile carp. And what we found a lot is predation is really controlled by predation of panfish. So if there is concern about carp or even rough fish, more habitat for panfish will improve.
Tell me a little bit more about the shear strength and resiliency of the islands. I know a little bit about cohesive soils. And I know there's islands. Just tell me a little more about how you anticipate they will stand up to floods.
Sure, I could take a stab at that unless someone else wants to. I will take a stab at this, but I will also caveat that I'm not an engineer, so we can give you more information later as needed. But I guess as background, building islands in these types of backwater areas in the Mississippi River is something that we have done extensively. So we have examples of success. We have handbooks that specify, you know, your side slope for the sand base, and then depending on location and conditions, where we would need reinforcements like rock veins and groins and at what interval. Our projects are designed for a minimum of 50 years. But we expect to see, you know, something like an island in a backwater area like this really last in perpetuity without the requirement for ongoing maintenance on it. We want to be able to go in, plant that forest area, the floodplain forest, and watch it grow, not be coming back and you know, pulling weeds and replanting or making an investment. Zach unloads Reed Island, brings it up, but in the first flood event, it's washed back down. That's not something we see. We've had a lot of success with the specs that we use and building reinforcement. And I apologize I'm not able to give a more technical answer, but I can connect you with someone in our civil design branch who can speak to that in a little more technical terms.
No, that was great. I could add one just real quick thing that in Pool 7, we used our dredge sand for the I-90 bridge. So Ames Construction actually built that bridge on dredge material. And we've done a lot of analysis of the sand in Lower Pool 4 as well, which is where the bulk of this material is going to come from. It's stable. It's stable stuff, so I don't think these islands will go anywhere.
We've been building islands like this for 30 years. We figured it out.
Yeah.
So in the areas that you're going to make deeper for the fish pools and that sort of thing, are those going to be areas? My understanding right now is that if it's been dredged in the past in Wisconsin, we can go back in and re-dredge it without a permit, without any other kind of special blessings. We can just go back in and pay for it to be dredged if we want to bring some equipment in and dredge it. Is that going to fall under that same caveat or not?
So what you're talking about, I believe, is that, you know, if you've received a 404 permit pass for dredging, you're allowed to go back in and do maintenance dredging on that without a new permit. Correct. I suppose technically that would fall, the same kind of rule could fall in place here, but we don't expect the need to re-dredge these. Generally over-dredge them to the point where we expect them to stay deep enough for 50 years. And I'm trying to think of a case in a project like this where we've gone in and done maintenance dredging. I don't know that we have. Don't think we've needed to.
Okay.
I could add to that. Over dredging might be something to look into. The USGS, I forget what it was, I would say early 2000s, did a bunch of, what they were looking at is sediment deposition at certain backwater areas. It happens to be that, and they repeated the study to get a rate. And it happens to be that the study, one of their transect study areas happens to be very near this project area. What they predicted, or based off their measurements, was about 0.1 inches per year. So if you extrapolate that over a 50-year lifespan, it's about 6 inches. So if you over dredge by about 6 inches, that might have some, your risk factor accounted for.
I guess I would argue on the Katrina and the pass. I know a lot of the fill that ended up in Bay City Bay there, the red spot, the line you have there below Dead Slough on the corner there, in a high water event, the water just blows right through the woods there, right into Bay City Bay, into the Katrina Pass area. And I would say that would be where a lot of your sediment is coming from. No, down below that, right here. It'll shoot right over that woods and right into the bay. And I would argue that's where a lot of your sediment comes from. I would also talk about habitat on the Wisconsin side. To tie into Bay City's question, the slough down there where the boat landing is a big habitat area. It's full of panfish and northern pike and bass, but it's getting isolated. It's so filled in. It would be quite beneficial to tie some type of dredge channel into that to keep it from being a dead end. It's spring fed, so it's always going to be a little viable, but when you talk about habitat's got to be involved, well, there's a lot of habitat right there. That gives you a reason to dredge a channel and help Bay City out to connect that to the lake and to the back channel.
I saw a couple hands back up here and make sure we get all our questions in.
I was just gonna say, can we take some of the sediment out of the back channel, because, like for the lower soil, because it's actually, I've got stuck this year for the first time ever running the back channel, and, we got out and had to push the boat, and it was the hardest sand that I've dealt with there. Some areas, are gonna be more silt and stuff, but, instead of getting stuff from other places, like what they're saying, going all the way down to Reeds, off the point on the south part of the lake there, where you're looking at doing the one island, there's stuff there they can grab, but then also out of the back channel, and then we get people using that a little more too, which will help that area out as well.
Yeah, so that kind of gets back to what Zach was saying before, that, we have to be tied with the authorized dredging for the maintenance of the main navigation channel. So we do have some restrictions as far as where we can go to get that course material, and working kind of in synergy with the authorized dredge cuts in the main navigation channel. Yeah.
You have a pretty wide range of work scope between alternative 1 and alternative 4, and obviously a big difference in cost. What's going to be the process for deciding the cost versus benefit to the alternative you select?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a few things that go into it, and it doesn't boil down to just the cost versus benefit. Part of our next step is going to be, evaluating some of the feedback that we hear from tonight, and then looking at, the viability of all these features, and then getting a good handle on how much sand is this, what is the cost. Within cost parameters, there's an upper limit on what the federal government can spend, so that's going to set some sideboards as far as cost. And then we'll do habitat benefits analysis. So we'll look at some kind of representative species for the area, probably a bird, a fish, and maybe a terrestrial animal, and model the benefits to that indicator species, and then be able to assess, where are we seeing the best bang for our buck. Kurt talked a little bit about the sediment resuspensions. We're also using a wind wave model, looking at where do we see these features are reducing wind fetch and reducing wave action, and where would we expect to see, kind of in the protected areas, the aquatic plant response. So we are able to start quantifying those benefits and then looking at the incremental cost per added benefit. So we really look for, if it's a small cost but a good benefit, okay, keep going. A small cost but a big benefit, okay, keep going. Until we hit that point where we're only getting a small added benefit, but we're just paying a lot more. And that's really where we kind of draw the line, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of science that goes into quantifying the habitat benefits and our cost estimates, and then deciding where to draw that line and what investment is worth it is a little more of a qualitative or an art than a science, because we have to make that decision with our partners, what we're willing to pay for.
Can I just ask for some perspective, because we talked a lot about the Catherine Pass. I'm sure we haven't talked to all the rec motors out there, just to show of hands as to who's a rec motor out here in the crowd, and then those that have used Catherine Pass or rely on Catherine Pass. So just a fair share.
Is it seasonal? Can you get through there in the summer?
Used to be able to get through there all year long, and now it's
Can I stand up here again?
turned into a minefield.
Yeah, from this photograph, it seems fairly evident that a lot of sediment enters from the fifth cut there and gets siphoned through Catherine Pass, or finds its way at any rate into Bay City Bay. And with all the alternatives that have been put forward, I'm surprised I don't see a suggestion to close off fifth cut. It didn't used to be there. When I was on the river first, 60 years ago, there was no fifth cut. There was a solid bar between. There was no way to get from the back channel to the main channel in those days. You could put up the 1939 aerial picture, so you see that there's a solid bar there. Well, if that's the way the sediment is getting into the bay, maybe closing off that cut would be a way of keeping it from doing that. I just wondered if that alternative had been suggested.
Fifth cut area, all those trees right above that are gone now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it would be a significant project.
It only makes that sediment come worse around that corner.
Yeah, honestly, that opening of Fifth Cut has grown quite a bit in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And that island just inside of Fifth Cut in the back channel is disappearing rapidly. It appears there's a lot more water going through Fifth Cut today than there was 5 years ago.
Those little islands are below the red. That's really filled in now, and now it's just a whole big flat where the birds are standing.
Yeah, Kurt talked a little bit earlier about kind of the trade-offs as far as prioritizing the areas. I think Ryan, you mentioned it too. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
We had another map that had absolutely everything. We had stabilization all over the place, and this isn't the first iteration either. This project came up 30 years ago. Probably, as an 1122 project that was proposed originally, and that was in the pool plans. And this isn't the first time we're talking about this area. But yeah, one of the early iterations, I believe we had, some stabilization here. This area got hammered in the last couple of years. You can see trees down all over the place. And those are areas that may need some help. But to try and put a project together, we had to concentrate on a couple different areas. Right now, those didn't make a cut. That's not saying that's not a problem. It's not saying that we can't look at it in the future either.
I think looking at it, the Catherine Cut area, our priority that we're trying to work on is up in Catherine Lake area here. We know we can have, if we choose to plug it, we know we can have a lot bigger impact to improve water quality up here by plugging this and this, because there's still inputs coming down the Wisconsin channel.
Thanks. We're right at 7 o'clock, so I do want to be respectful of time and adjourn our formal presentation and question and answer period here tonight. I want to thank everybody again so much for coming out, for your interest, for your questions. I want to thank my team, Wisconsin DNR, Lake Pepin Legacy Alliance, everyone who's helped me with their expertise to answer your questions tonight. And if you didn't get the chance to ask your question, please make sure that you did get a copy of the agenda that has my email. There's contact information on there. Please reach out with comments or questions if you didn't get the chance or they come to you later. We do want to continue to hear your feedback, and for folks that have a burning question, we'll be sticking around here for a few minutes before we start to take things down if you want to find one of us one-on-one for some additional questions to wrap up this evening. So again, thanks. I appreciate everybody's time and.
Thank you.